developing news now.
They're in the news,
Samsung now
in your pocket,
Look at the hole in this guy's shorts.
and on your mind. What's going wrong with our batteries?
Turn this phone off.
For the last few decades, batteries have powered a revolution in personal electronics, changing our lives. And now they're headed for our cars.
Are electric cars becoming a thing?
Yes, they are.
Even the grid.
Renewable energy means that we need energy storage.
But are we already pushing their limits?
Anything which is able to release a lot of energy, that is a potentially dangerous thing.
Or can they be better?
I'm not seeing any fireball.
We've got to work with people that want to introduce the true next generation battery.
There is definitely a race who will invent the next big battery technology.
The deck's stacked against all of us, but the rewards are so big.
Can we beat the odds as we search for the super battery? Right now on Nova. The lowly battery. We barely notice you when you work, and we curse you when you don't. You're the no-show, the missing ingredient, not included. And when you die, a piece of us dies as well. Face it, battery, you have issues. But cheer up, my humble friend. Things may be changing. Scientists all over the world are in a race to make you better, to make you powerful, to make you cleaner, to make you cheaper, to make you into a super battery. It won't be easy, but the stakes are huge. Warmer temperatures, more severe storms, higher sea levels. What's causing all this climate change? Scientists virtually all agree. Burning fossil fuels, the oil, gas, and coal that have powered our civilization up to now. The challenge is to make the switch to other forms of energy, like renewables, solar, and wind, and to trade our gasoline-burning vehicles for greener electric ones. But all of these are missing the same critical component: the right energy storage. A battery. Can science transform this Clark Kent of energy into the super storage of tomorrow?
I'm David Pogue, and if that perfect future battery exists, I'm gonna find it.
Because you never know when you might need one.
All right. Castaway. Deserted. Nothing to survive with but my wits. Let's take inventory.
Luckily, I have a knife. A phone charging cable. And yes, a phone.
This is gonna be easy. Hello, 911. Oh, no. No, 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 no! It's dead!
To make this phone work, I need a portable source of electrical power. I need a battery. What do I remember about batteries? A battery always has a positive electrode, a negative electrode, with something called an electrolyte in between. When there's an external connection between the two sides, the battery starts working. First, the negative side reacts with the electrolyte, and the electrons are set free. As they travel through the circuit, they do useful things like produce light. When they reach the positive side, the electrons are reabsorbed. Chemical reactions, where one material gives up electrons to another, are common. That's what happens when a fire burns, or rust forms, or even when you breathe. So building a battery isn't that hard. All you need are the right materials, like the kind of stuff you might find on a beach.
The ingredients for a battery: a negative electrode, an aluminum can, a positive electrode. In this case, I've got some charcoal in my pants. And finally, an electrolyte. I have some fresh, organic seawater.
The good news is, this aluminum can battery actually works. And if I had a device that could measure the voltage, I could show you.
The bad news is, I need 50 of them. All right, 50 cans, one battery, one dead phone. This is the moment of truth. It's charging! Can I make a call on this thing? 911. Hello? Oh, I'm so happy to hear your voice. Listen, I was on this cruise ship and I fell overboard. I think somebody pushed me, and now I'm on this desert island. I didn't know where I am. Can you... Landmark? Look for a landmark? Oh. Actually, never mind.
In truth, charging a smartphone from an aluminum can battery is really difficult. My cheap, low-power phone barely let me make one call. But the point is, making a bad battery is easy. Making a good battery, well, that's hard. And I've asked the experts.
I don't know if I would call it a super battery, but to get to the next generation of battery, it'd have to be higher energy density.
Energy density, which is how much energy you store in a given volume.
What that means to the consumer is that you might be able to run that device for a longer period of time.
Optimistically speaking, we should be able to double or triple the energy density in the next 10 years.
Cost is another factor that is hugely important.
Cost is very important.
And at the same time, be safe.
Safety.
Safety and cost, as you can see, can play against each other, right? You can make a very cheap battery, which can be very unsafe.
So those are just some of the ones that we look at all the time.
And they're not easy things to deliver.
So that's a lot to ask of one battery. But finding that battery for electric vehicles may be critical to fighting climate change. Burning fossil fuels, like gasoline, emits carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas that traps heat, causing warmer temperatures and climate instability. Transportation accounts for about a quarter of all U.S. greenhouse gas emissions.
Cars and oil are linked very, very strongly. Something like 67% of oil goes for gasoline, and 90-some% of transportation fuel is gasoline.
The whole purpose of electric vehicles is to reduce the amount of carbon footprint, to reduce the amount of emissions.
Electric vehicles could be good for the environment, but it's going to take a lot to pry the gasoline nozzle from our hands.
The funny thing is, this isn't the first time that electric batteries and gasoline have fought to win our automotive hearts.
At the turn of the century, no one knew which technology, electric or gas power, would dominate the nascent car industry. In fact, quiet electric-powered cars were a common sight on the streets of New York. To learn more, I pay a visit to one of the foremost experts, or at least one of the funniest, Jay Leno. And he's got some insider info on the car of tomorrow.
I think this is the car of the future. This is how we'll all be getting around. Electric.
This is the car of the future?
Well, this is a 1909 Baker Electric. There's no pollution. This was high tech back in the day.
Talk about Back to the Future. The 1909 Baker runs on energy stored in batteries.
See, there you are. You have 6 batteries in front.
As with today's electric cars, you could charge the batteries by plugging the car in.
I want to stop at exactly $10.
In those days, there were charging stations all over New York City.
You want to go for a ride and see what it's like?
Yeah, this runs. You don't take it on.
Of course it runs. You seem so stunned by it.
I like this. You got the user's manual on the seat. That's a good sign.
But I show you how sort of maintenance-free these are. All you do is turn the key, and you are,
That's the wheel?
ready to go.
Oh, my God. No way.
Even today, it's a great ride. Really quiet. Just the hum of an electric motor. But back then, electric cars still lost out. Their batteries weren't dependable, and many were recalled. By the time the problems had been sorted out, a former Detroit Edison employee, Henry Ford, had unleashed the extremely affordable, gasoline-powered Model T. A few years later, one of its big drawbacks, the hand-crank starter, was replaced with an electric one. That, and the growing availability of cheap gasoline in rural areas that lacked electricity, eventually sealed the deal. Today, thanks to climate change, electric cars are getting another shot. Success probably depends, once again, on the battery. The best version we've managed so far is probably the one in your pocket, the battery in your phone, which uses the element lithium.
Hoverboard is on fire.
And you also may have heard they can be dangerous.
I am, Mom.
This happened at a gas station in Kentucky when his e-cigarette battery exploded, literally lighting his pants on fire.
This morning, technology giant Samsung planning a massive recall.
Then, of course, there's the Samsung recall of over 2.5 million cell phones because of lithium battery fires. So, if it can be so dangerous, why lithium? What makes that element both the belle of the battery ball and, at times, a fiery mess? To learn more about lithium, I visit my friend with all the elementary answers, mad scientist Theo Gray, at his mad scientist workshop on his Illinois farm.
Nice!
In the past, Theo has shown me the power of the elements.
Oh, the humanity!
So what's the story on lithium?
Seems like once you start digging into the battery world, you hear about lithium a lot. So what is lithium?
Yeah, so lithium is an element that, happens to have properties that make it extraordinarily well suited for delivering a lot of electrical power in a very small, light package.
And I'm guessing because we're in stormtrooper outfits that it's something dangerous.
It is able to contain and release a lot of energy. And any time you have anything which is able to release energy, that is a potentially dangerous thing.
Theo tells me you can learn a lot about lithium just by looking at its place on the periodic table. High up means it has a low atomic weight. That means lithium doesn't weigh much.
Which is, a great thing if you're trying to make a battery to fly a drone or just to have something that gives you, a lot of power and doesn't weigh very much.
In fact, even though it's a metal, it floats on water.
Oh, it's silver. Pretty. Thank you.
You notice again, it weighs nothing.
Wow.
Theo also points out that lithium sits on the far left of the table, in the column called the alkali metals. Compared to other elements, they readily give up an electron, exactly what you want for the negative electrode in a battery. The lithium in my hand is doing just that, giving up an electron to oxygen in the air, creating the blackish lithium oxide on its surface.
Theo, would we call this
oxidizing?
It is oxidizing. It's basically rusting. It is the exact same reaction as rust forming. It's just that, iron rust is kind of a reddish, flaky thing. Lithium rust is this kind of black coating.
When Teo whips out some lithium foil, I get an even better look at the oxidizing process, thanks to the foil's greater surface area.
Yeah, you see it's darkening?
It's tarnish. It's like tarnish.
And that's more or less the same reaction that would happen inside the battery, except inside the battery it's happening in a very controlled way.
Wow, now it's not shining pretty anymore.
And I bet it's getting hotter, too.
It's super hot.
The lithium foil reacts quickly in the air, but if you really want to see it in action, try water.
That was a great one.
Lightweight and willing to give up electrons easily, lithium is nearly a perfect metal for use as the negative electrode in a battery. But it turns out there's a big problem if you want that lithium metal battery to be rechargeable. Remember the 3 parts to a battery? Okay, I left some things out. In a lithium metal battery and many others, there's a separator, like a piece of plastic, to keep the electrodes apart, because if they touch, more on that later. That separator isn't completely solid, and here's why. When a lithium metal battery discharges, of course, there's a flow of negatively charged electrons through the wires on the outside. But inside the battery, there's also a flow of positively charged lithium atoms, or ions, in the electrolyte. They flow from the negative lithium metal electrode through the permeable separator to the positive electrode, which, kind of like an apartment building, houses the ions in its layers. Recharging the battery sends both the electrons and the ions back the other way. And that is when using lithium metal as an electrode runs into trouble. Scientists discovered that over time, the returning lithium ions tend to clump on the metal surface, building spiky tree-like structures called dendrites.
They get rougher, rougher, and rougher until they stick out like a finger from the surface and continue to get longer and longer and longer.
And eventually, those dendrites can reach the other side of the battery, which is the cathode, or the positively charged electrode. And then there's a short circuit, instantaneous discharge.
Instantly, electrons flood across, releasing the battery's energy, generating heat, which in turn can cause fire and explosions. After years of trying, no one could find a solution to the lithium metal conundrum. So scientists invented an alternative that became part of our lives in the early 90s in products like the Sony Handycam. They called it the lithium-ion battery. The key to its success was replacing the negative lithium metal electrode with a new apartment building, a carbon electrode that housed lots of individual lithium ions when the battery was charged. Everything else still worked the same. Discharging the battery sent the ions through the electrolyte over to the positive electrode. Recharging the battery sent them back. But now, at least in theory, all the welcoming spaces in the layers of the negative electrode stopped them from piling up into dangerous dendrites. That meant lithium-ion batteries were far safer than lithium metal ones, but at a price. They stored far less energy.
The FAA has long warned airlines of the potential dangers presented by lithium batteries.
And safer doesn't mean completely safe.
Lithium-ion batteries have already been linked to numerous cargo crashes.
All those battery fires you've been hearing about in recent years, those are lithium-ion batteries. To learn more about what really goes into a lithium-ion battery, I traveled to Ann Arbor to check out the University of Michigan's Battery Lab, part of its Energy Institute. Senior Lab Manager Greg Less has offered to show me around and even build one with me. Turns out, lithium-ion batteries come in different shapes.
Okay, so this we've seen before. This is like a watch battery.
Right.
This is a little bigger than a standard AA.
Absolutely. That's a 18650, and you might find that in a rechargeable power tool, an older model laptop, or the Tesla Roadster.
But I've never seen this in a power tool.
Well, no, there's actually a bunch of them in there, maybe 6 or 7, put together in series inside of that brick that you plug into the bottom of the tool.
Oh, okay. And this, what, for a phone? Or?
Yep, you'd find a battery like that either in your phone or a laptop or a tablet computer device.
And you actually made all of these in this room?
Yes, we sure did.
That's cool. Walk me through it, good sir.
I happily will.
Greg gives me a whirlwind tour of the process of making an 18650. He mixes up the ingredients for the electrode material, which gets baked onto foil and sliced into smaller rolls. Then we enter through an airlock into a special low-humidity dry room. Any moisture from water inside a lithium-ion battery harms the electrolyte. Once inside,
here we go.
We put the rolls on this crazy machine, which winds them together with a roll of plastic separator into a jelly roll. Let's take a closer look.
So we have a top layer that's the separator.
Yep.
And pull that off. Then we have our copper and graphite negative electrode. Another layer of separator here. And then the positive electrode layer that we made together of lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt oxide.
So every lithium-ion battery that's in one of those cylinders, including the ones that are bundled together to make laptop batteries and power drill batteries, they're all at heart a bunch of these ribbons?
That's correct. Just a series of ribbons wrapped up together.
Wow.
After sticking the roll into a metal can, Greg injects the last key ingredient, the liquid electrolyte.
The electrolyte is the cream in the jelly roll. It's what connects everything together. The electrolyte's a liquid solution that has lithium ions dissolved in it. And when we charge or discharge the battery, the electrolyte is what allows those ions to travel back and forth between the positive and negative electrodes.
With the final steps of welding and crimping the top onto the metal can, we were done. Somehow, I expected more. Because it's batteries like the 18650, or one of the other lithium-ion styles, like these flat ones in pouches, that will determine if electric cars are a viable option to replace gas-burning ones. So far in the US, plug-in electric cars haven't had much success. In 2015, they made up less than 1% of all new car sales.
There are a few reasons to be skeptical of electric cars. Probably the biggest one is cost. But costs of electric car batteries are coming down dramatically, and they'll continue to come down for the next 5 years. We're going to find out that more and more people can afford to buy an electric car. So that problem is getting solved as we speak.
The other concern is called range anxiety. How far can you go on a single charge? Surveys show Americans want to be able to go hundreds of miles, even though the average daily auto use is only around 40. But there is some justification. For most of the country, roadside charging stations are few and far between. Despite lackluster sales, car makers continue to test the waters with lower prices and longer ranges. Like the Chevy Bolt, the first moderately priced all-electric car with a range of more than 200 miles. Or the new Tesla Model 3, which has similar price and range. Anticipating a large demand, Tesla plans to produce 500,000 cars a year in the latter half of the decade. But that would require the entire current worldwide production of lithium-ion batteries. So they've built this, the Gigafactory in Nevada. When it's completed, it'll cover more land than any building in the world, and it will produce batteries, quote, faster than bullets from a machine gun, unquote.
So this is the S?
I stop in at Tesla's Palo Alto headquarters to find out where all those batteries fit in the current Tesla Model S.
So the battery pack actually runs the length and the width of the vehicle. So what you're seeing right under here is our battery pack.
Oh, the batteries are already in here?
The batteries are in here.
Now, if I could go in there with a screwdriver and rip that open, what would the actual batteries look like? Are they just a whole bunch of little AA's?
They're little cells, yes. So we've got about 8,000 individual cells in there.
8,000?
Yes.
And do, by any chance, do they look like this?
In fact, they do. Early on, Tesla standardized on the 18650 because of its availability. But at the Gigafactory, they'll switch to a bigger version, which they claim is the best and cheapest in the world. Other electric car makers prefer the flatter pouch batteries, like those made here for GM at LG Chem's plant in Holland, Michigan. While I was there, I stopped in to see Denise Gray. She's the president and CEO of an LG Chem subsidiary that does battery research and design. So we've heard for years that electric cars are coming soon. But are they finally, at least almost here?
This plant makes exclusively batteries for electric cars, right? Like, are electric cars becoming a thing?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. We're still in the early stages, but we're making great progress, and I think we're accelerating down that plan of having more and more electrified powertrains on the road.
How many Americans will buy electric cars, or how soon, remains to be seen. But with more and more electric vehicles on the road, engineers are racing to make the lithium-ion batteries they contain even better. Cheaper to produce, longer lasting, and most importantly, safer. I traveled to New Mexico to visit the Sandia National Laboratories. Scientists Leanna Steele and Josh Lamb showed me the Battery Abuse Testing Lab. Here, they do all the things those warning labels tell you not to do with batteries, to understand how they fail.
So we are going to open this
They
door
take
up.
me past a 2-ton blast door to the testing torture chambers, where they puncture, overcharge, burn, short-circuit, and drown batteries.
Walls, ceilings, and floors in this building are all made up out of concrete reinforced with rebar, anywhere from 12 to 14 inches thick.
Today, they're performing a crush test, where they'll slowly smash the middle of a battery with up to 15,000 pounds of force, the sort of thing that could happen in an electric car crash.
This is a hydraulic lift here, and so it's going to actually start lifting up, and that impactor there is going to start crushing the battery.
After a final check of the setup, we are ready to go.
Okay, Chris, are we ready to start the test? All right. Test is going now, it sounds like. So we heard hydraulics just turned on a little bit.
On the hydraulic lift, the battery slowly rises into the plunger.
You can start seeing the gap is starting to close in between the plunger and the battery.
You can see the plunger is crushing the inner battery cells a surprising amount, still with no reaction. But we're getting close.
So you'll start hearing some hissing. That's the battery venting when it actually starts to go into failure.
That's why we weren't standing in that room.
Exactly.
So all that energy that's stored in that battery, it's just discharging all at once.
When a lithium-ion battery cell uncontrollably overheats, it's called thermal runaway. Leanna and Josh break it down for me. The plunger crushed the inner cells of the battery until a negative and positive electrode made contact, a short circuit. Just like when dendrites short out a battery, electrons flooded across in a massive discharge, creating heat, which then turns some of the liquid electrolyte into gas. That burst open the battery's foil pouch, and then the vaporized electrolyte ignited. That's known as venting with flame. All the fire and heat set off reactions in other nearby cells, sending them into thermal runaway as well. In the end, the fire reached a temperature of over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, easily hot enough to melt the aluminum used in the battery. Leanna and Josh show me some video of other tests. This is a battery that's getting overcharged. And this is a nail going into the center of a group of 18650s. The center cell fails, gradually taking down the rest of them with it. From the videos, and having seen it here myself, one thing seems obvious. If there were a way to get rid of the vaporizing flammable electrolyte, that would be a big step toward making these batteries safer. And I'm not the only one who thinks so. Meet Mike Zimmerman. He's a Tufts University professor and materials scientist. About 5 years ago, he got interested in lithium-ion batteries, thinking there had to be a safer electrolyte. Mike's background is in plastics, and I've come to take a look at what he's invented.
So this is your battery?
That's the battery.
It looks like any other lithium battery inside one of these.
It's the same.
Okay.
Same format.
Same voltage?
Same voltage.
You think this is an unusual battery?
It's a battery that is much safer than conventional batteries. And upon any damage, any puncture, any cutting it, it will not catch on fire.
Did you say any cutting it?
Correct.
Can I make a cut in this?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
It's not going to jet fire into my face?
It will not.
Before I do that, let's consider these examples from YouTube of folks poking at lithium-ion batteries. They reveal that it doesn't take much to create a dangerous short circuit with disastrous results. And now, is it my turn?
Big or little?
Whatever you want.
I'm alive! Wow. Look at that. And guess what? The lights are still on. This is like a Houdini thing. I mean, this is like, I'm gonna make a doily. Oh my God, it's still on! Come on! I'm gonna make you a little paper doll.
So what's the trick? Compared to a typical lithium-ion battery, Mike's replaced the liquid electrolyte and the separator with his special plastic to create a completely solid battery. Unlike the liquid electrolyte, which easily catches fire, Mike's plastic is flame retardant. And even though it's solid, amazingly, it allows lithium ions to pass through it at a rate equal to or better than the current liquid electrolytes. And here's the best part. The plastic physically prevents dendrites from shorting out the battery. That means that Mike can go back to a lithium metal negative electrode, potentially doubling his battery's energy density. Here's another demo using an iPad, with its original battery removed, and in its place, one of Mike's that's even bigger than the last one cut to pieces. And I'm going to stick a screwdriver through it, like you saw in those YouTube videos.
Here we go. So far, I'm not seeing any fireball. Okay, you've done it. You've made a battery that doesn't explode when pierced. At the very least, I would expect to see some smoke. I would expect to feel some heat. There's nothing.
Yeah, it's because of the solid plastic electrolyte. It's not flammable, and it's very insulative. It doesn't get too hot, and it doesn't burn.
And it keeps working.
Well, that was an unintended consequence.
Can I do it again? My mortgage is too high, and the tax rates are insane, and I dented my fender. right, now it's not going to turn on now. Oh, come on! Come on! That's it. A damaged battery. And yet, no smoke, no flame, no sparks. Do not try this with your iPad battery.
So far, Mike's kept his company's work mostly under wraps. This, in fact, is the first television interview he's given on it. But there's still more development to go before your new smartphone makes use of it.
And if I were one of your critics, certainly there'd be something I would attack you for. This got to be, it can't be too good to be true.
Right. I think that development, is never done. We have to do a lot of reliability testing, and the scaling up aspect of this is going to be a lot of work to scale it up. So we've got to work with people that want to do that, want to introduce a true next generation battery.
Whether Mike's solid-state lithium battery will come to market anytime soon is hard to know. If it does, and if it can double the energy density of the batteries in electric cars, that would be revolutionary. But electrifying cars as a strategy to battle climate change comes with a big caveat. To have real impact, the source of their electricity needs to be green as well. And that means cleaning up the grid that charges them. If you're like me, you don't even think about it. You flip on a light switch, or you turn on something plugged into the wall. Where does the electricity come from? When was it created? How does it arrive at your house at exactly the right time? How does the electrical grid work?
The grid has been called the most complex machine humans have ever built. It is the largest, the most extensive, has the most parts, and it also has a beautiful simplicity. It's driven by this very simple energy in must equal energy out at every moment in time.
You have to generate electricity over here at the power station at exactly and instantaneously the same rate that you use it over here on all the customers.
Electricity is essentially instantaneous, so it's a fraction of a millisecond or microsecond old because it travels basically at the fraction of the speed of light across the wires. So we have to make it instantaneously. The moment you want it, I have to make it.
Matching the demand means constantly ramping up and down the amount of electricity generated. For example, by turning up or down gas-fired power plants, or spilling more water over dams, or even firing up an old diesel plant just to meet an hour of peak demand. It's a constant, complicated dance. Now, as we try to shift away from power plants running fossil fuels, the complicated dance that matches generation with demand has found some new partners. Renewables, like wind and solar. They can range in size from a huge wind farm generating hundreds of megawatts of power to the small solar array on your neighbor's house. The dance just got more complicated.
We're taking a complicated system and making it a lot more complicated. You have to be able to meet the demand still when the sun doesn't shine, when the clouds come through and the output falls, when the wind dies down.
If these new, renewable but intermittent sources of electricity are going to play a major role on the grid, they require a new player: energy storage.
I don't think renewable penetration can go higher without a robust energy storage solution. That's for sure.
In the US, there's already a little energy storage on the grid, equal to about 2% of our generating capacity. Most of it looks like this reservoir in Bath County, Virginia. It's been called the largest battery in the world, but it's not like any battery you've seen. The system is called pumped hydro, and it operates like a rechargeable hydroelectric dam. During the day, when there's high demand for power, the electric company lets the water flow from an upper reservoir to a lower one, spinning turbines and generating electricity. But at night, when there's low demand, they use the excess electricity generated by other plants to pump water back up to the higher reservoir, recharging it. Today, about 99% of all grid storage in the United States is pumped hydro. It would be a relatively inexpensive way to store excess energy from renewables for later use, except for one problem. You need the right geography for the site, with changes in elevation. And even then, creating new ones can raise environmental concerns. So the search for solutions for grid energy storage is still on. Just outside San Francisco in the Bay Area, one company is giving it their own spin, Amber Kinetics. They sell an energy storage system built around massive spinning disks called flywheels. The principle is simple. Electricity powers a motor that spins up the heavy flywheel. Now, energy is stored in the flywheel's momentum. To convert that back into electricity, the flywheel engages a generator, its momentum turning the generator's shaft. As the flywheel slows, the generator creates electricity. Needing both weight and strength, Amber Kinetics makes their flywheel out of steel.
How much do these babies weigh?
This is about a 5,000-pound part.
Wow, and how fast is it going to be spinning?
It's some good number of thousands of RPM.
In a finished unit, the flywheel sits inside a welded steel chamber that tightly seals shut, so it can spin in a near vacuum to reduce friction with the air. They also reduce friction using a giant magnet mounted above the flywheel, which lifts it upward, removing most of its weight, so it rests only lightly on its support bearings.
And so the friction in a mechanical bearing is partly determined by how much force is the bearing supporting. And so we make the force extremely light.
All of this adds up to breaking new ground. Flywheels have been used on the grid before, but mostly to store energy only for seconds or minutes. Amber Kinetics flywheels can store energy for up to 4 hours. For example, capturing the energy generated by a solar array during the day for use in the evening, a process called time shifting. Seth shows me what a nearly complete flywheel unit looks like.
There's a flywheel in here that you made, but is it spinning right now?
No, it's at rest now.
Okay, if it were spinning, would I hear it?
You would not be able to hear it because the part is balanced to a very high degree and the residual vibration is minuscule.
As a grid storage solution, flywheels, a kind of electromechanical battery, have an advantage over chemical batteries. They don't wear out for decades. The same can't be said for lithium-ion batteries. But there are a lot of those getting put to work on the grid as well. This is Tehachapi, California, near the Mojave Desert, home to some of the oldest and largest wind farms in the country. But the wind blows strongest at night, when demand for electricity is at its lowest. In 2014, Southern California Edison installed a $50 million energy storage system that uses lithium-ion batteries.
What we want to do is be able to use this to smooth out, firm up the output of those so it's much more predictable. For an example, when the wind blows during the nighttime, capture that energy and then use it during the daytime when the demand is high.
Lithium-ion batteries have made inroads into grid storage, but they're still expensive. And part of the premium paid is for their light weight, which matters for electric cars and portable electronics, but maybe not for the grid. Here in the Pittsburgh area, battery scientist Jay Whitaker has taken a different approach. He's sacrificed lithium-ion's lightweight portability to create a battery that's cheaper and safer. It's nicknamed the saltwater battery. We're going to retrace his steps, starting at square one, the periodic table.
All right, so these are the elements that make up our world. which elements can you use to make a battery?
Really, almost any of them. If they have any reaction potential at all, you can make electrodes out of them and they will store energy. That's not that hard. But that's not really the question you want to ask, right? You want to ask which of these elements can we use to really scale large, like really big energy storage to solve the world's problems, right? And to answer that question, we really get rid of most of this. Like this is gone. We slide this out. And then we start thinking about what's called crustal abundance.
Crustal abundance?
Crustal abundance.
Crustal abundance is an estimate of the availability of an element in the Earth's outer layer, its crust. The higher the percentage, the more available it is, which translates into cheaper, and probably better for the environment since it's more common.
So if you can pick from crustally abundant materials or elements, you're probably going to have the best shot at having a low-cost, environmentally safe battery.
I'm always in favor of crustally abundant.
So silicon, these will not surprise you. You have carbon, you have hydrogen, you have zinc. These are in no particular order, but you'll recognize all of them. They're very common materials. They make up our everyday life. Oxygen, and a couple really important ones. You've got sodium, which is obviously everywhere in the ocean. You've got potassium, which is a heavy biological factor, and lithium, which you might not think is crustally abundant, but actually is. And these were the ones that I started looking at 2007 when I was trying to figure out what elements I would use to put together in any which way to create something that was going to be functional.
Out of this initial collection of elements, Jay created a battery that had a sodium manganese oxide positive electrode and a carbon negative electrode. When the battery was charged, sodium ions left the positive electrode to gather at the negative carbon electrode. When discharged, they would return to the positive electrode. With each charge and discharge, they shuttle back and forth. The electrolyte, sodium sulfate salt dissolved in water, gave the battery its nickname, the saltwater battery. From there, Jay began tweaking his recipe. The end result was a battery far less energy dense than lithium ion, but non-flammable, non-toxic, and cheaper.
So this is a barrel of our active material. This happens to be our cathode material. It's a manganese oxide-based system, and it's really simple. It basically looks like dark sand or dark dirt.
Listen, Jay, I've been to a few battery factories in my time.
I'm sure you have.
And I've never been allowed to walk up to a barrel in a non-humidity controlled room. Yeah. Are you just really crude here, or is this somehow...
Well, so the key difference between this battery and probably all the others you visited is that we use water as an electrolyte.
Water changes everything in a battery. On the downside, it limits the voltage. Too high, and the water splits into hydrogen and oxygen gas. But it also means you don't need the expensive low-humidity dry rooms required to make lithium-ion batteries. And of course, water is non-flammable, safer.
In fact, these salts that we use as electrolyte salts are flame inhibitors.
Is this toxic, this thing?
This is not toxic at all.
I could eat this cathode material?
It is biologically consumable. I wouldn't recommend. It's going to taste a little salty to you or a little weird, but yeah, there you go.
Pumpkin spice. Yeah, it's totally fine. It's not even salty.
No, it's just like sand.
Yeah.
It is basically sand.
It's actually a little better than sand, as a frequent sand eater.
It is.
These days, Aqueon Energy is churning out batteries in a former Sony Trinitron factory outside of Pittsburgh. Here, Jay's emphasis on safe ingredients saves a lot of money in manufacturing. The electrode material I taste tested is pressed into cookie-like wafers, which in turn get assembled by these pick-and-place machines from the food industry, used in packaging. All without the tight humidity and dust controls found in lithium-ion battery factories. Already, saltwater batteries are part of hundreds of solar installations around the world, ranging from utility projects to individual homes. But Jay sees himself at the beginning of a massive undertaking to bring energy storage to the grid.
This is not a small-scale project. Like, to get storage to be relevant in the world, you have to make huge amounts of it. And this is just a drop in the bucket. We're just getting started.
On that, everyone agrees. If we want energy storage to integrate renewables into the grid, we're woefully short on quantity. In 2010, Bill Gates noted that all the batteries on Earth could store less than 10 minutes of the world's electricity production. To fill the gap, we'll need systems that can scale up easily. Levi Thompson at the University of Michigan introduces me to one, a rechargeable battery unlike any other, the flow battery. He explains that a typical battery is a closed system.
And this is all sealed, so everything that you need is in there. It's like a cake. You put everything in there, you get everything you want. Every battery kind of looks like this.
Every battery but a flow battery, says Thompson. Instead of a closed system, a flow battery has external tanks containing two chemicals. They're pumped past each other through a chamber. Because of a special thin membrane, they can't mix, but in close proximity, they do react, generating electricity. The capacity of a flow battery depends on the size of the external tanks that hold the chemicals. Bigger tanks, bigger battery, more energy.
Flow systems are, for large-scale applications, much more efficient, much more cost-effective than sealed systems. It's a much better solution to the problem.
Flow batteries will surely play a role in the grid. This is what they have always been designed for and thought of as the grid battery.
Some flow batteries are already in operation, like this one at Fort Devens, a U.S. Army installation in Massachusetts. The battery helps integrate solar generation, reduces peak demand, and improves power quality.
So this is Dr.
And research continues, like the work of these two members of Levi's team. It's early days, but with more development, flow batteries might just turn out to be the answer for grid storage.
This is something that's shown to work and people are actually using it, but that's not the mind blower so much as where it could be in 40 years.
Absolutely.
Flow batteries are perhaps the newest exciting entrant, but I would expect over the next decade there's going to be a whole series of these new exciting entrants into the field.
So in the end, we still don't know if the grid super battery will be one technology or a mix of pumped hydro, chemical batteries, flywheels, flow batteries, and others. But if we really want to integrate renewables into the grid and trade our carbon-spewing vehicles for greener ones, and do it on the massive scale required to fight climate change, one thing's for sure. Energy storage, and lots of it, will be in our future. And so will the ongoing search for the super battery.